Hey guys, Chris Mosier here with a special guest pod today. You've heard, if you're a regular listener, that Progress Texas is on the radio in Houston since late last year, which is super fun for me since radio has been my primary career since I was a teenager. We couldn't be more stoked to have our weekly In Progress Roundtable Talk run on KPFT Radio in Houston on their HD2 channel every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. And we want to expand our reach on radio, especially since I'm told by our younger staffers here at Progress Texas that the kids are going analog this year, and there's renewed interest in broadcast radio among the otherwise all-digital youths. So this is great news, you ask me, and great timing for this really cool partnership with KPFT, and we want to form more of those same partnerships with other stations around the state. If you're a radio nerd like me, head over to progresstexas.org to learn how you can support our 2026 radio initiative. We'd appreciate the help. And so this, I believe, is our third time to feature the Tuesday morning KPFT show called The Midterms on our podcast feed here. It was hosted prior to his current run for Texas Attorney General by Joe Jaworski, and is hosted lately by fellow attorney Ernest Wittring of the Houston area, who invited me to come on and chew the fat this last Tuesday morning. Ernest, thanks for having me, and here we go.
Good morning, this is Ernest Wittring, and you're listening to The Midterms, the show where we discuss the themes, the messages, and the issues that will define the midterm elections on November 3rd, 2026. If you can believe it, less than a year away. Happy New Year, happy 2026. Today, it's our great pleasure to have Chris Mosier with us. He's a podcasting director for Progress Texas. For those of you who don't know, Progress Texas has effectively become the digital rapid response command center for the progressive movement in our state. While the national organizations issue white papers, Progress Texas is in the trenches of the information war, countering disinformation with facts and clear messages. Chris himself is a veteran broadcaster with over 30 years of experience on the Texas airwaves. He's a native Texan, graduate of Texas State University with a degree in history. He brings that perspective to the unfolding political landscape. His voice is well known to Central Texas from a 30-year broadcast career that includes 10 years at Austin stations like KLBJ, KVET, and Sun Radio. He's taken that experience from traditional radio to the front lines of advocacy media, where he hosts the Daily Dispatch and the Progress Texas Happy Hour, programs that have become essential listening for anyone trying to navigate the noise of the current administration. And he joins us now. Thank you for being here, Chris.
Absolutely, Ernest. Hello, good morning, and thank you. I love that command center part. We may have to incorporate that into our lines.
Well, absolutely. I worked with a certain AI tool to come up with that. So that's what the AI stratosphere thinks of you. So
well, that's what that's one of the things that AI will kind of tend to do for us, is helping us pass those little verbal hurdles that we come across from time to time. So
we absolutely need that help. Well, tell us. Let's start with the beginning. Let's talk about Progress Texas. What is it, and what its mission is, and how people could help out if they were so inclined.
Very, very good. So Progress Texas is, and really speaking of our lines, we call ourselves a nonprofit rapid response media organization promoting progressive messages and actions, which sums it up pretty well, really. And the rapid response part is really what was at the central idea when it was founded back in 2011. Several Austin Politico type people, including Mayor at the time, Steve Adler, here in Austin. And if you can imagine 2011, that's the Obama administration, halfway through the Obama period. Rush Limbaugh has been around for a good while doing the damage that he did and continues, the waves forward with that. Alex Jones is on the rise. Fox News is on the rise. There are loads and loads of different media outlets out there that are talking about conservative ideas and talking about, and when I say ideas, I use that term loosely, presentations that, of course, are given to conspiracist sort of thinking and just about any sort of a tale that can be told to keep the audience in thrall. These folks in Austin decided that Texas in particular needed something to provide some sort of a counter to the disinformation that was very much occupying a great swath of the conservative media bandwidth. And so that's where Progress Texas came from. Matt Glazer was our first executive director back in the day. And then for I'm pretty sure over maybe 60-70% of the time that Progress Texas has been around, a guy named Ed Espinosa was our executive director. He's the guy that hired me in 2020. As you mentioned, I come from a radio background, which is really music radio, just spinning records and playing the fool between them, but had always had a political penchant in my own brain. And as so many of us did in 2016, when Donald Trump was first elected, I decided I needed to do something more. Yeah. Through radio and also through being a musician, I knew some things about sound gear and internet stuff. And so I started using those skills for my local clubs. Ended up joining a podcast called the Left in Texas podcast with some folks that were way more smart than I was and more experienced than I was in politics. Met Ed through that process and ended up working for Progress Texas, which I've been with him since about 2020.
Well, it's wonderful. Have you run out of things to do? Mission completed, all done. Fly the banner, stand up in the jumpsuit.
Yeah, mission accomplished. Yeah, we again, it's weird to think back to 2011 when all of this started. None of us could have imagined where we would be in 2026, and especially having this conversation with you, Ernest, on the 5th anniversary of January 6th is especially meaningful. I think we're seeing an unbridled what many of us would call an outlaw regime that's running our country right now, and a large part of their power on a multiple levels of and iterations and lanes of power flow through the state of Texas. And so I think our mission is more important than it ever has been.
So speaking of January 6th, if you can believe it, there's news reports about the people who were convicted, then pardoned, now wanting to be compensated from the federal government that they attacked on January 6th. And the decision on whether to compensate them or not runs through the executive branch, and everybody can predict what that means. Sooner or later, on some Friday night, on a 3-day holiday weekend, we're going to find out that our tax dollars have gone to pay the folks that were convicted of attacks on the foundations of our government, pay them back for their time and trouble for doing so.
I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that happen. In fact, that would be one of the least surprising things to happen coming out of the Trump administration. And I talked about this some on the morning podcast, which, by the way, I should warn you, I get up early and do a daily podcast, as you mentioned in the intro. And so I'm at peak caffeine right now.
So this is peak. This is peak. Come 8:30, are you dragging?
If I start to really go off on a tangent, please reel me in. But I think of and I encouraged folks on this morning's podcast to look back at some of that footage and dig into some of that, because there's a fair amount of footage that's come out from the January 6th insurrection that a lot of people haven't seen. It's a lot more broadly covered over the time span that a lot of people may have tuned that out, and for good reason. And so it's worth reviewing. It's worth thinking about, not only, as you say, the fact that a lot of these, well, all of them were either pardoned or had their sentences commuted. I would guess, and I would really like to see perhaps someday some statistics on how many of the folks who made the move on the Capitol that day are now working for ICE. Yep. Or are now working for the FBI, or working for the administration in some, perhaps clandestine fashion. So, and I'm getting into conspiracy a little bit there myself, but it's not a very difficult or far leap to make.
Well, what do we say? We say many people want to know. Is that the
many people?
Many people want to know. That's your intro to say anything you want. Many people
exactly.
want to know.
Many people are saying. The
voices in my head want to know.
Exactly. The voices in my head definitely, Ernest, absolutely want to know.
So was the arrest of Maduro on the top of the list of issues that Texans were concerned about coming into January of 2026? Were you hearing that all over the state, that what they were mainly worried about was who was in control of Venezuelan oil?
Oh, no, clearly not. Outside of the fact that we were, blowing up boats that we really didn't know exactly who was on those boats. I mean, clearly there was a lot of talk about, but that kind of faded into the general noise of just the outlaw nature of what the Trump administration has been up to. I was honestly, when I woke up, what was it, Saturday morning, and learned that they had actually plucked Maduro and his wife, out of their lodging there in Caracas. I found it surprising that they had gone that far. I kind of thought that it might be really just kind of saber rattling, or and we had of course heard that there had been some diplomatic action between the Trump folks and the Maduro folks, perhaps with some kind of a resolution. So I was a little surprised they went as far as they did. Although we really shouldn't be, because this is something that we've been messing around in South America. Our country has been under largely, not all, but under largely Republican administrations, for better part of a century, going way back. And so, that what we have been talking about since then is the horrible, a couple of, the broader scale, and then the more Texas centric sort of scale. The fact that this is, clearly setting a bad, or let me say this, let me back up and say it doesn't set a bad international precedent. It joins a bad international precedent along with the situation in Ukraine. It's turned into, of course, we all know that Donald Trump is a great big fan of Vladimir Putin. And so, perhaps Trump needed a country that he could push around for his own reasons. And so now we've established this might makes right sort of situation. That's going to exist as long as Donald Trump's in power, and as long as there is no American counter to these other countries. Who's going to be surprised when China makes a move on Taiwan? China can now point to both Ukraine and Venezuela as examples of, hey, we're securing our backyard just like other the superpowers on the planet have. And so there's that. Boiling that down to Texas, and this is something that I've learned really about Houston. We've been learning a lot about Houston lately, in fact. And one thing that I didn't know about Houston was that the refinery apparatus and infrastructure down on the Texas coast, largely around the Houston area,
right.
A lot of that is tailor-made for the particular type of crude that comes out of the ground in Venezuela. Very heavy crude that's difficult to harvest and also difficult to refine. And, over decades of a pretty wide open pipeline, business line for the petrochemical industry between Venezuela and Texas, we've built a lot of the stuff that exists on the planet that's tailor made for taking care of that type of oil. And so we'll see what happens in terms of, will Donald Trump succeed in turning Venezuela into a vassal petrochemical state? Will it be the 51st state, the Venezuelan oil fields? And if so, clearly Texas will take a big role in whatever develops from that. But I don't think it's going to be that cut and dry. I don't think it's going to be that easy.
No, and I'm betting they're not going to get representatives and 2 senators to sit in Washington. So
very likely, very unlikely.
Yeah, unlikely. But more to the point, what are you hearing are the main issues, either from the progressive wing of the electorate or from Texans in general? What are they mainly concerned about? And won't come as any surprise that many people running for office who we've interviewed on the show are talking about affordability, the economy. What are you all hearing when you're out and about around the state of Texas?
I think we're in lockstep with that for sure. We're hearing, just like everybody, that every time you go to the grocery store, you're shocked at how much things cost. Every time you go out to eat, you're shocked at what that costs. My wife and I took our 2 kids in their early 20s out to eat a couple of days ago. We're all doing dry January, so there were no cocktails ordered. And this was at, neighborhood Mexican restaurant down here in South Austin. And our bill came back, almost $140 for 4 of us to have a single meal out with no alcohol involved. So the economy is hurting everybody. And that's top of mind. And that also expands out into the job market. As I say, 2 young kids trying to enter the job market right now. We had looked forward to the end of our college paying 4 years as the time that we could relax and watch our kids launch their careers and get into their own lives. Instead, we're faced with dwindling jobs and dwindling wages, and it's a worrisome time when it shouldn't be. And I know a lot of folks who have kids who are entering the job market are feeling that as well. So just the economy in general, I think, is the main thing. We are, of course, very plugged in to more issue-oriented progressive groups, who each of which have their own sets of concerns, which are very, very valid. Reproductive freedom, of course, is in a shambles, almost non-existent in Texas now. The situation with our LGBTQ community is horrible and getting worse every day, every session for sure. The environment is a complete afterthought to the current government of Texas and of the U.S. So there are, while the economy is central, the economy is what everybody feels and what everybody experiences on a regular sort of basis, and thus should be central to anybody who's looking to score office and make a change. All of these other issues are also still very much present and very much important.
So I want to approach, kind of themes and messages in the upcoming election, not on terms of what else can the government do for me. I want to vote for this candidate because I want the government to subsidize my health care. I want the government to give us a better cost of living on our Social Security. I want the government to provide more protection for the environment. Okay, that's one way. I want more from my government. Let's just assume that in 2026, we're not going to get more from our government. Let's assume that we're going to get the same and we're going to keep it from getting worse. Let's talk about the baseline. The baseline doesn't always stay where it is. It can always get worse. And if anything has shown us in the last year, whatever we thought was outside the bounds is now inside the bounds, including Are we going to have an election? Are we going to seat the representatives that are elected? Or are we just going to decide we can do it better out of the White House? And so I wanted to give the listeners some idea, because this came up on another show with a guest about it. It doesn't have to stay the same. For example, reproductive freedom. Not only are you not going to get reproductive freedom, you ought to be thinking about your health care records being monitored for signs of abortion.
Sure. Sure.
If you didn't like, not having choice, it can always get worse. And by that, we all, not all of us, women have their reproductive records subpoenaed, reviewed, calculated, and quantified to see if there's any signs of terminated pregnancies. That's how it can get worse on
Absolutely.
reproductive freedom. On the environment, you want to see how it gets worse, just keep going, because there's not an effective EPA being funded, meaning the mission of the EPA is not going to be completed, and it can always get worse.
Right.
You want to talk about our civil rights? They can always get worse. They are and can always get worse. I mean, I don't know about you. The idea of being punished for being on the air and engaging what is essentially the core of the First Amendment rights is something that everybody now has to calculate in thinking about speaking out and exercising those First Amendment rights. I don't know about you. I feel it. You're on the air every day. Well, the idea of feeling pressure not to speak because of concern about being punished for it is a very real and present danger for people speaking out.
You're absolutely right. That's absolutely, I think, a fear that's very real and very much justified for anybody who's engaging in political discourse that's not in lockstep with Greg Abbott or Donald Trump at this point, especially those of us who are, broadcasting those views and sharing those views with as many people as we possibly can, like both you and I both are. But it's also kind of, one of those things where it's, hey, 20 years from now, when I'm talking to my grandson, who's not born yet, and he asks me, what did you do when things were falling apart, back in the mid 2020s? What step did you take to try to make things right? What step did you take to try to prevent whatever bad happened up to that point, or to preserve what we may still have at that time? I want to have a good answer for that question.
Every generation has its calling. Gets called.
Right.
We're all called.
Absolutely. And so it's there, and there have always been risks. I don't know if you're watching that American Revolution Ken Burns thing on PBS, but that's, and there, of course, that's a very complex story as well in terms of the motivations for the American Revolution, which I commend Ken Burns for being pretty broad open about the role of slavery and all of that. And of course, it makes me think of the teacher in Dazed and Confused that talked about how July 4th was really about celebrating a bunch of rich white guys who didn't want to pay their taxes. But at the same time, those people were risking the noose and were challenging, what was then the strongest military power on the planet in Britain. So, yes, you're right. Every generation has its moment when it has to stand up. All of us, I think, should have a calling. We live in a society, Ernest, that we're kind of fat and happy. We can all kind of go about our lives and play video games and watch football and do our jobs and go to the bar at night and really not think about any of this stuff. We've built for ourselves a situation of luxury that unfortunately allows far too many of us to just simply tune out and not even think about these things. And so that's part of the mission of Progress Texas, is to try to, through our digital outreach and through our podcasting and our live events, to do all we can to make people realize that this stuff is important, and that this stuff is not only important, but it's vital. It's to me, a part of the obligation of being an American citizen is to stand up and make your voice heard. And by the way, it's also a lot of fun. It's also, we have a lot of super cool people that we've met and get to work with all the time, whether it's lawmakers or activists and advocates and just normal folks who we've met. Our donor bunch is one of the most fun bunch of people that we get to hang out with on a regular basis. And so this is super, super enjoyable work. Once you buy in mentally and realize, the importance of it, and the importance of it, and the fun in combination is kind of what we're trying to put together at Progress Texas.
Well, let's boil it down. It's the beginning of the year. Everybody likes to do their list. Give me 3 things that you would want all the voters in Texas to understand as we get ready for the November 2026 midterms.
Well, in terms of the midterms, can I instead talk about the primary, which is coming up, much faster, up in March?
Yes, I've quickly consulted with the panel, and they give thumbs up on changing the question. It's approved.
Yay. Well, and not to disparage the November election, which of course is is pretty much the drop dead moment, I would say, for our democracy. But the primaries first, coming up in March, February 17th, if I'm got that right, is the first day of early voting. We're coming up real soon on deadlines to register. And one of the things that I'm sure gets talked about on your airwaves a lot is how difficult it is to vote in Texas, especially for people who move frequently, especially for people who are mobility challenged. There are a whole bunch of different sectors of our electorate that have had hurdles placed in their way by the state of Texas in order to be registered and ready to vote. So register, and monitor your registration on a regular basis. We've also seen voter purges. We've seen, this thing lately with the Secretary of State's office deciding they've found all these, suspected undocumented voters. And so that to me is kind of willy-nilly. That's guaranteed to pick up some people who should not be picked up by such a dragnet. And so every single one of us, especially once again, if you're an apartment dweller, if you're a younger person, I moved every year, between 18 and about 27, I moved every 1 or 2 years. And so every time you move, you got to redo your registration. So make sure you're good there. That's number 1. Number 2 is get involved and get plugged in. Find your neighborhood club, find people to hang out with, whether that's Progress Texas or anybody else. I would prefer go find the folks in your community who are involved in politics in some way or the other. Get to know those people, see what they're doing, and get involved in the fun that they're involved with. And number 3, I think kind of dovetails off of that, is start working on who you're going to bring with you to go vote. It's great to go vote. We love, of course, it's to me, voting is one of the most fun parts of this. I love voting. I vote early and often, I like to say. But if you can drag a few folks, especially some first time voters, especially people who have not been bitten by the voting bug and the political bug, get those folks involved, start prepping them now, because those primaries are coming up here at the beginning of March.
I suppose we should probably point out for the benefit of all, vote early, vote often means vote often in all the elections, not vote multiple times in the same election. Let's just be clear about that for the listening audience, of course.
Right.
Only in this day and age would we need to make that clear. Excellent points. It's the basic blocking and tackling. You've got to register. You've got to show up.
Right.
It's not as easy as it should be. It's not as automatic as it should be. I mean, to me, we handle most of our life on our phone now, including all the business transactions, all our
That's right.
banking. It should be that easy. It's not going to be that easy. We have to do a little bit of work, but register, make sure you vote, bring a friend, and
Right.
it all that's
Ernest,
yeah.
to your point, that's actually a really good point. Is that Texas is one of very few remaining states that does not have online voter registration, and that's something you got to fill out a form and send it in or take it in. There, it's still a pen to paper situation in this state, and so that's something else to think about. Especially anybody who's listening, if you're a younger person or you're, haven't registered and you're getting fired up about it, you can't do this online. And Ernest is right. Just about everything else you can.
Yeah.
Voting in Texas, you cannot do online. You have to do it via the mail, via the Secretary of State's office.
So if you're under the age of 35, you need to look up what a form is, maybe what a pen is, what the mail is. How to stamp an envelope.
Can you imagine being a young person these days having to figure out stamps and figure out mailboxes? Oh my God.
I'm sure there's a YouTube video on it. There's maybe a TikTok video on how to do the whole stamp mail thing. But anyway, it's important. I don't want to leave the show. We've got a couple more minutes. I don't want to leave the show on a negative note. I never like to. All of what's wrong with whatever you think is wrong with the country, one way or another, right? If you're a Democrat, if you're a Republican, all of it can be fixed in the next election. And
absolutely,
the change in Texas, which has historically been a red state, if 8% of the voters change their mind, this state goes from red to blue, and it's not all or nothing. You might like some candidates, you may not like other candidates, but that's really it. It's a swing of about 850,000 voters in Texas change this state, and then if Texas were to swing from red to even purple, what happens to the national scene?
Oh yeah, it's a linchpin. It changes everything. If Texas becomes as you say, purple or even blue, imagine that. It changes the entire game. It changes the entire country. And the way to do that, I think, in the current moment in Texas, there are so many, if you're talking about getting people to change their vote from red to blue, that's difficult to do because of the tribal nature of that has crept into our politics. And so what I like to try to, get across to people, and what I believe to be true, is that politics, we've heard this repeatedly, and it's true. It's not about right versus left. It's not about D versus R. It's about top versus bottom. If you're not a billionaire, you stand to lose everything. You stand to lose your freedoms. You stand to lose your economic standing. You stand to lose the future of your children. You stand to lose everything if you are not one of these protected, top 0.01% of our economic strata. We must stop voting against our interests as the people. We must stop thinking about this left-right dichotomy that's been placed upon us. We must start thinking about how we move ourselves forward, how we move our individual lives forward. And that's by getting together and making things right on an economic sort of level.
Well, that's perfect. And Chris, thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. That's all the time we have. We look forward to talking to you again. And folks, that's the end of the midterms on January 6th, the 5th year anniversary of January 6th, where our Capitol was attacked. We'll talk to you next week. This is the midterms with Ernest Wittring on 90.1 KPFT in Houston, 89.5 in Galveston, and 91.9 in Huntsville. Thanks a lot, Chris.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ernest.